It is 1:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us, and for those of y'all who joined early, you got to hear all the fun commentary in the banter. We'll send out, like I said, this will be recorded, so if you have to duck out or if there are follow-up questions, you'll get an email from me, and our email and contact information will be shared at the end. And before we get started, I'd like to have us introduce ourselves, and then I'll just jump into my presentation and give a little bit of housekeeping stuff. So Becky, I'm gonna let you start since.
All right. Hello, everybody, and thanks for Amanda and Alyssa inviting me today. My name is Becky Griffin. I work for UGA Extension, and I am the coordinator of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. And we are so very excited that North Carolina has joined this year. So I will keep that intro short because I have lots to say later on.
And again, my name is Amanda Wilkins. I am the horticulture agent for North Carolina Cooperative Extension in Lee County, North Carolina, which Lee County is in Sanford, which is southwest of Raleigh. If anybody is familiar with Big Bloomers Nursery, a lot of people do know that, and that's in Sanford. So kind of in the middle of the state. We're at the tip of the Sandhills. It's a very interesting place to be. Meredith, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I think Alyssa is going to join us a little bit later.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Favre. I'm also in Lee County. I am the local foods agent here. I help a lot with farmers markets, and my background is entomology. So when Amanda was telling me, we're going to do the pollinator census this year, I was like, I am all gung-ho for this. So happy to be here along for the ride, and I will pass it off to Alyssa.
I'm not sure if Alyssa's going to be able to, she's on a quick call, so she'll join us in a little while. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I just have a few slides, because when I told our director here in Lee County that I was helping with kind of the statewide rollout of this program, he's like, well, why should anybody care? And I do, while we are, a lot of folks who are joining us today already are very interested in pollinators. Maybe a lot of people told some great stories on the feedback form of what they're doing, some of the things they're excited about this year, how they think that they're going to implement this in their communities. And it was so cool just to see all the stuff that was going on across the state for pollinators. But if you're here, you probably already are interested in pollinators and have some sort of background information. But it's important to remember, especially if you're going to be bringing this program to other places in your community, there are going to be people who don't know maybe all of the reasons why they should care about pollinators and pollinator conservation. So that's kind of what we're going to start with. There is a chat element. So please do feel free to say hi to each other, introduce yourself to the group. Just make sure that you are, I noticed that Nancy and Ty, just make sure when you're typing, if you want to type to just the panelists and the host, that when you click that for who it's to. If you want to send a message to everyone who is joining the webinar, make sure to select everyone. And if you want to find out where the chat is, if you go down to the bottom of your screen and click, either it'll be up, or you can click more and click chat, and it'll usually open it up in a little window. So anyways, so we've done our introductions. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction as to why folks should care about pollinators, and then I'm going to hand it off to Becky, because really she is the person that you want to hear from. I come from a botanical garden background. I've been in the horticulture industry for more than 10 years now. I've interned and worked at 8 different botanical gardens around the world. And I love plants. I am a plant person. And that's kind of where I come at pollinators. But as I have worked in extension and gotten to know all the wonderful work that folks like Becky and Meredith are involved in, it's really expanded my understanding and my appreciation for pollinators, because my background is not in entomology. My background is in horticulture. And so I garden for the beauty of it, but to see the ecological purpose, I think, has really been eye-opening for me. So, and for master gardeners out there, I do coordinate the Master Gardener program in Lee County. I know there are a few of them who are joining us today, which is really awesome. But as folks who are doing outreach, whether you do work through extension or are just working for a nonprofit or just a community-minded citizen, you know, you can be the voice for pollinators. Pollinators can't speak for themselves. It's one of the challenges that we have. And so by understanding and knowing these facts, you can share the knowledge and this experience with folks who may not know and inspire them to action. So pollinators have really taken off in the last few years. The Pollinator Partnership, the Xerces Society have really done a lot of work trying to raise awareness about pollinator conservation. And there are a host of different certification programs that now the different pollinator gardens across the state and across the country can get. I know Doug Tallamy's Homegrown National Park program has really been blowing up. So I think it's really shown that these citizen science programs and garden certification programs have really raised awareness, but there's still a lot more work to do. But now of all the times, I think Becky will talk about this a little bit. She was saying the other day, she's like, my job is so much easier nowadays. And so we can take advantage of that kind of hype and that momentum and really make a difference. So I'm just going to name a few things. I would like to throw some statistics at you, but there's four main themes. One of them is we like eating a high diversity of foods. Nobody wants to just eat bread for the rest of their lives. We love fruits and small fruits. We love tomatoes, especially in the Southeast. Our intern here in Lee County and I went out to a blueberry and blackberry field, and raspberry and the blackberries were still in flower, and we saw the skulled wasp out there pollinating just in just yesterday. So about 75% of the world's food crops depend on pollinators, and about 1,000 plants around the world that we like to eat and use for fiber and other sources of food, beverages, fibers, spices, medicines require pollination to complete their life cycle. And pollinators provide pollination services to more than 180,000 different plant species and 1,200 different crops. And that 180,000, depending on who you ask, some people said 90% of plant species, and the estimate of the number of plant species changes from 200 to 400,000, depending on who you talk to. So that number can be woefully underrepresenting what's really going on. So we like to eat a lot of different kinds of foods as humans around the world. We also like functioning economies. Unfortunately, money is where a lot of people, they want to know the dollar signs. They want to know how it makes sense for their business. But pollinators, through their pollination services and their ecosystem services, provide an estimated $217 to $517 billion to the global economy every year. Again, that estimate depends on who you ask. This $217 was a Pollinator Partnership number, but I read some other things that up to $500 billion. In the US alone, the Xerces Society, that almost $3 billion per year of services are provided by pollinators. And that's $300 billion that we don't have to spend paying a human. This is just money in the economy because pollinators are doing their thing. But the downside is, especially, and this is just looking at beekeepers, which is just one species of insect, but there are estimates that beekeepers are losing almost 30% of their bees in their managed hives every year, and you're losing money not only in the honey and the replacement costs, but also the pollination services, because there are farmers that will pay beekeepers to bring their bees, but if their bees aren't working or their bees are leaving or dying, they're not actually pollinating the crops that they're being brought in to pollinate. We do like functioning ecosystems. Remember, humans are part of the ecosystem. Sometimes we struggle with that. So about 75% of all flowering plants rely on animal pollinators. And pollination is important because that helps plants complete their life cycle. If plants are completing their life cycle, they are not perpetuating their species. And if they're not perpetuating their species, life comes to a grinding halt. More than 200,000 species of animals act as pollinators. That is insane, but only 0.5% of those are hummingbirds, bats, and small mammals. So 99.5% of pollinators are insects, which are usually very tiny and mostly overlooked. And so as humans, we have to be mindful of our tiny friends in the ecosystem. And fruits and seeds that are derived from insect pollination are a major part of the diet of approximately 25% of birds. And this is kind of talking about, again, those ecosystem services and how kind of insects are one piece of this whole food web. If birds aren't eating, birds eat insects, birds feed insects to their young, but then there's also other things that eat insects, and then there's other things that eat those things. And so again, the ecosystem can come to a grinding halt. And ecosystem services are just the natural processes of life. The main one that we really focus on and we're focusing on today is pollination, but soil generation, balancing pest and beneficial species, erosion prevention, and carbon sequestration are some other ones. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface on our real understanding of how everything fits together, and especially putting an economic value on these things, which a lot of times is what's going to drive some of the other things. And then the human side of things, we like to share our gardens and our spaces. A lot of people garden for a lot of different reasons. And this whole program, the census, was born out of, Becky's going to talk about the goals, but gardening is huge. It's how humans a lot of times interact with the ecosystem. And there's lots of research to show why we garden, but learning, beauty, socialization, being creative, meeting our emotional and spiritual needs, and that connection that sometimes is really hard to quantify with words, has been shown time and time again through actual research that those things are important and drive why we do things. And I don't have to sell you guys, but pollinators are under threat. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services back in 2016. These were two percentages I hadn't quite seen before, and I wanted to share with y'all. But 16.5% of vertebrate pollinators, and that's a lot of insects. Mostly insects are threatened by extinction globally. And so we are definitely focused. We're focused in the Southeast with our census, but this is a global problem. And affects different areas in the world differently. And then 40% of invertebrate pollinators are facing extinction. And there are others, citizen science programs that are ongoing right now to monitor, especially the Southeast Bumblebee Atlas project is really looking more at bees, but there are lots of different citizen science projects that are looking at specific pollinator groups. And if you've got questions, or if you are working with some of those other citizen science projects, please share them in the chat, because a lot of us are just trying to get the word out. And right now, the main drivers of species decline are pretty firmly these four things, which are affected and impacted by humans. So habitat loss and conversion to intensive agriculture and urbanization, especially in North Carolina. We know our population is growing significantly. And if I had a dime for every time somebody told me a story about their favorite woodland getting cut down, I would be a rich person. Pollution, mainly caused by synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. biological factors, including pathogens and introduced species and climate change. All four of these things are just reoccurring themes in the decline of insect pollinators. And like I said, North Carolina is becoming more and more populated. So being part of these ecosystem survey or these citizen science projects is critical because we can take a snapshot in time about what is happening. And so as we know that we are seeing more people move into the area and there is more development and changing developments, we can at least know what it was like today, and then we can compare that to the future. And managed landscapes, human managed landscapes dominate most of the land area in North Carolina. They are starting to compete in a lot of counties with the agricultural coverage. And these are spaces that humans have control over. And a lot of times they're dominated by non-native, non-ecologically functioning plants. They don't sustain the natural communities and provide those ecosystem services that we know are so important. And because of the nature of the types of plants and the way they've been installed, and usually by scraping off topsoil and putting in non-functioning plants, they just don't regenerate like our natural healthy ecosystems do. And so this is kind of my transition and handoff to Becky, because y'all who are here today, the Great Southeast Pollinator Census is a backyard, community-based citizen science project to really shine a light on how our managed landscapes, how our residential landscapes, how our backyards can be part of the greater story of insect conservation and bringing back pollinator diversity and insect diversity in our landscapes. Because what you do in your landscape can help or harm local ecosystems and the services they're able to provide. And so hopefully by y'all being here and being engaged citizens, y'all can share the word about how folks can make small incremental changes and shine a light on how pollinators are around us all the time. So with that, I appreciate everyone coming out today. And Becky, I'm gonna stop my slideshow and hand it off to you. Let's see here.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, you take beautiful pictures. You have to share those with the group on our social media. And I love the way that you refer to them as our tiny friends.
Because they are.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And Amanda, make sure that everybody can see this. Are we good?
You're good to go.
All right, I'm going to stop my video and so you can just concentrate on what I'm talking about. All right, so I am Becky Griffin. I have a lot of hats. I am the Community and School Garden Coordinator for UGA, a Pollinator Health Associate. I'm a certified beekeeper. I'm also on the committee for the Southeast Bumblebee Atlas that we're starting this year. I do a lot of work with pollinators, and they are lovely friends. And I want to say, welcome North Carolinians. If you follow us on social media, this is Welcome North Carolina Week. So I'm highlighting your lovely state. I actually live in Blairsville, Georgia. So I can see North Carolina from my porch, and I'm in Murphy, North Carolina, that area quite a bit, working with the John C. Campbell Folk Art School. So I am no stranger to your lovely state, and I'm just very excited to have you guys on board because it's about time, right? So let's get started. I work at the Georgia Mountain Research and Education Center up in Blairsville, and we were talking earlier about the importance of this project, the importance of pollination. Well, on site, we have 2,000 apple trees, and they bloom all in about a 3-week period. Now, in order to make a quality apple, we need to have each blossom visited 8 times by a pollinator. So if we just say that we have thinned our apple blossoms and maybe each tree has 1,000 blossoms, and we have 2,000 trees blooming in a 3-week period that each need to be visited 8 times, that's a lot of pollination. And oftentimes, if you're on the street, you ask people to talk about pollinators, the first thing they say is a honeybee, and it may be the only thing they say. Well, we know that we have over 4,000 native bee species that don't include the honeybee in the United States, North America. And in Georgia, I know we've put the economic price of pollination at $488 million. So it's big business. It is big. It means a lot to, as Amanda was explaining, what we eat. And we have to be advocates for our tiny friends, because honeybees have an advocate. They have people who make money off of them. Either they're selling pollination services or honey. Native bees, wasps, flies don't have an advocate. So that's kind of our job. So how the census got started. I was traveling around our state looking at community gardens and school gardens, and I was meeting a lot of people who knew a lot about plants. They knew where to plant them, what those individual species required. They also knew a lot about soil health and maybe fertilization, that type of thing. But over and over, I was finding out there was a lack of knowledge about entomology. A lot of the gardeners thought if it's an insect, it's bad. How do I get rid of it? And I was seeing a high number of pest insect problems, low harvest of some of our fruits that require pollination. At the same time, I was working with school gardens and finding out that our wonderful biology teachers, who do an amazing job, don't really get trained on entomology in college. So they are less likely and sometimes even loath to talk about insects. So I kind of put those things together, and the Great Georgia Pollinator Census was born. We had our pilot projects in 2017 and 2018. We recruited 50 gardens to go through the process with us. At the same time, I met with researchers and statisticians all over the United States to see that if our accounting criteria would meet the needs of what researchers would need data-wise. And knowing this is a community science project, there's an inherent, I don't want to say problem, that's too strong of a word, but sometimes the researchers will take the data with a grain of salt. And I know that going in, you know that if you've done citizen science projects. So we spent 2 years fine-tuning this project, and it launched in 2019 with these 3 goals. The first is to create or add sustainable habitat. North Carolina's growing, Georgia's growing. Let's face it, the Southeast is the place to be. People are moving in our areas, and maybe they've come from up north and they think lilacs are the best thing going. We know lilacs have problems with mildews, or maybe they are not used to the droughts that we may have in the middle of the summer. So we're encouraging people and actually training and teaching people to grow sustainable habitat that require less inputs, less water, less pest problems. And these things, just creating sustainable habitat not only helps the pollinators, but it helps the planet. We're going to use less water, those type of things. So that is an important part of the project. And of course, the second goal is my favorite. We want to teach people about the importance of these insects, what they do for us for free, if we just take some time to give them the habitat that they need. And thirdly, we want to make sure that data is useful. And the data is being used. I know right now it's being used for a pollination economic valuation study. If you go to our website and look under resources, you will see a list of some of the papers that have been published based on this project just for the last 4 years. So even though we count on 2 days every year, this year, August 18th and 19th, so I know your calendars are marked, it is a year-long initiative. We start at the beginning of the year talking about creating that pollinator habitat. How do we do it? What are some plant lists that are really great? Things that are blooming in August, things that are native, that type of thing. And then we go into best management practices. How do we grow these things sustainably? How do we manage them? How do we handle weed issues that we have? And all of this is done through a newsletter, social media, in-person classes, webinars, those type of things. And then we get into some insect ID, teaching people how to differentiate the different categories that we're going to talk about. Right now, we are in the middle, as I mentioned, of Welcome North Carolina. Next week is WASP Week. on social media. So tune into our social media channels to learn about wasps and why they're important in the garden, how they are pollinators, and what we can do to help those little tiny friends. All right, the crux of the project is this. On one of the census days, you will find a favorite pollinator plant, and that just means a plant you see some insect activity on. You will sit outside. I usually have a chair, maybe some sweet tea, and you count and identify the insects that land on that plant for 15 minutes. Now, do you have to be an entomologist? Are we asking for species identification? No, we are asking you to differentiate the insects that you see into one of 8 categories, which we'll talk about. After you've done your count, you head back inside or use your phone and you upload the counts to the project website. The morning of the first day, the website, so this year on August 18th at 12:01 a.m., the front of the website will change, the landing page will change, and the portal to upload your counts will be there. We're going to ask you what the weather's like, what the temperature's like. We're going to ask you the name of the plant you counted on, that type of thing. It is very easy peasy to upload your counts. Then you can download a beautiful certificate showing that you participated in this project. So here are the 8 categories: carpenter bees, bumblebees, honeybees, small bees, which are anything smaller than a honeybee, wasps, flies, butterflies, and anything that lands on your plant, any insect that is not one of those 7 goes in the other insect category. So these are categories that I'm going to teach you very quickly how to differentiate from. If you go to the project website and you live all by yourself in the middle of North Carolina, you have no access to go to a meeting or go to this webinar, and you really want to participate, everything is there that you would need on the website. There's an insect counting and identification guide. There are several videos, there are educational materials, and again, our social media adds to that. So these are things that you have access to as an individual. Also, you have access to them if you're leading an event. Let's say you belong to a garden or a neighborhood or a school, and you want to lead an event. All that information is there for you. So our website is gsepc.org. You can sign up there for our newsletter, and you can look at all the resources that I mentioned. For educators, the census data is on the website. You're welcome to look at that. And for frequently asked questions, resources, if you are having an event and you want to create a flyer or you want to use any of our insect mascots, all that is there, free to use with you don't have to ask anything. Our tagline, our motto is protecting the Southeast pollinators one count at a time, because I can't emphasize enough that this project matters. All right, this project matters. And one of the things I love about this project is it's a positive thing. We can turn on the news and we can look about habitat decline. We can see climate change. We can see insects being put on the endangered species list, and we can get really down about that. At the Pollinator Census, we are all about positivity. We're going to help. We're going to build habitat. We're going to learn about these insects. We're going to give data to researchers about them. So this is a positive thing that people can get involved with that really does truly make a difference, and you feel empowered because you're actually able to help. This is the cover of our insect counting and identification guide. It is on the website. You can easily download it, and it's full of pictures. So you don't have to read a lot of entomology words. You can look at different insects and how they're different from each other. And it really makes it easy to participate and learn a little bit more about the insects in your garden. And here is an example. All right, so we're going to ask you to differentiate between a bee and a fly. On one side, we have this beautiful fly. And I know it's a fly because I don't see much hair on that body. I see eyes that touch in the middle. I don't see any discernible antenna. All right, so it looks like a bee maybe because it has coloration. This is a seraphid fly. It is a bee mimic. Now, entomologists will tell you, well, the easiest way to identify a bee from a fly is a fly has 2 wings and a bee has 4. Well, that's really easy if you have them under a microscope. That's not very easy if you're sitting outside trying to count pollinators for a census. So that is something that, is true, but it's not true helpful. If we look at the other side, we have a beautiful bee. This is a bumblebee. She is covered with hair. Look at all that hair on her body. Her eyes separate a little in the middle because she has 3 ocelli that have to land in the middle of her face. But look at that antenna. She has very easy antenna to spot. So when you're out in your garden, you're going to see syrphid flies and you're going to see bumblebees. And the easiest way, I think, to tell the difference is looking for that antenna. See how easy that was? So already you're learning counting skills just in a few minutes' time. Another difference is the bumblebee versus a carpenter bee. So the carpenter bees that we are interested in are those big ones that everybody has a love-hate relationship with, right? The big eastern or southern carpenter bee, the ones that may put some holes in your fences, but they're wonderful pollinators. So how do we tell the difference? They're about the same size. They enjoy some of the same plants. A bumblebee is hairy all over their body, whereas a carpenter bee has a bald abdomen. We like to call that the shiny hiney. So shiny hiney on a bumblebee and a fuzzy rear or a fuzzy derriere on the bumblebee. Very simple, easy to spot, easy to know. And now that I've told you the word shiny hiney, you will not forget them. I was once in the Atlanta airport with my husband and we were in the line to get the TSA line and somebody yelled, Becky Griffin. And I'm looking over and he's pointing at me and he says, shiny hiney. So it catches on and it's an easy cue to remember the difference between those 2 insects. So I hope you're getting the point that it's not too much entomology to ask people to learn. And it actually is kind of fun to learn a little bit more about the insects in your garden. All right, here's an example of the counting sheet. The counting sheet, we have it in Spanish and English. It's on the website. You can download it. You can also use your phone to put your counts up, just so you know that. But we have some cues here, some pictures to kind of remind you about the fuzzy rears and the small antenna. We have a little spot for you to circle the weather conditions and the temperature. And then after you filled it out, if you don't want to go inside and log onto your computer, you can use the QR code to go ahead and upload your counts. You can print this out if you're counting at home with your family. If you're having an event at a garden or a school, you can print many of these out, again, on the website for you. And here is an example of the census certificate of participation that we had last year when South Carolina joined us. These are printed off from the website. They feature all of our beautiful little insect mascots. I have seen these in school hallways. They are presented at school board meetings to classes who participate. I have seen them be given at county commission meetings, given to a community garden, and they're in kiosks. Families actually will print these and put them on their family bulletin board. So it's just a fun thing that goes up on the website on the day of the event so that you have a memory of participating. Here's just a glimpse of some of the numbers. So once the counts are uploaded, I give everybody usually 3 weeks to upload your counts because some people have big events and it takes a while and teachers get busy. It takes a while to upload the counts. So here's what we were looking at over the last several years. One of the things you'll notice in the bottom is the number of pollinator gardens. So if you have added a pollinator garden in response to this project, you check a yes as you upload your counts, and we get a location for you so we can map it. People are also asked to give a fact that they've learned from participating in the census, some information about how we could make the census better, and just general feedback on the process so that we have some evaluation, some feedback on how we can continue to make it better. You notice 2020 was the census, was the COVID year, and actually so was 2021. So in 2019, we had a lot of events where people could get together and maybe count socially or have someone help them. Of course, that was not possible in 2020, but we did have a way to emphasize counting with your family. So it became a very popular event in 2024 families in Georgia. We also, toward the census, will post information on recipes that require a pollinator, like watermelon salsa. We have a Spotify playlist that you can listen to as you get pumped up to count. So we've tried to think about just about anything to make this a fun and enjoyable event. Here are the gardens that have been created. I remember we talked about that, how we emphasize sustainable habitat. So in Georgia, over the past 4 years, we have 2,167 new pollinator habitats. And what we found is a person that lives in a subdivision, let's say, goes to an event. They go to a local garden, they go to their local extension office, and they count because they're kind of curious about this project. They get excited. They've learned about their pollinators. They go back to their subdivision, tell their neighbors, and the next year they have a neighborhood party and everyone's counting on their pollinator gardens. They're adding new ones. It's kind of contagious. You know, the love of pollinators is contagious. And we can see South Carolina joined the census last year, their first year. They had 17 counties participate that first year with gardens as well. So it's a fun project and it's catchy. In Georgia, I have created project partners. And what that means is these partners agree to promote the census and perhaps have an event either on a census day or before the census, have a workshop. And sometimes these workshops are building bee boxes or creating sustainable landscape plans or even practice counting. But you'll notice these are some of our project partners. You'll notice that there are project partners that seem to have no interest in pollination at all. Why in the world will Project Chimps want to sponsor or be a part of this? Well, Project Chimps actually has a garden area that they've planted gardens, and they decided that this was something that they also wanted to be a part of. So they will host counting events every year at Project Chimps. We also have several gardens, some places that you would think would be logical. ERM is Environmental Resources Management. It is a consulting company that works to better our environment. And of course, they are 100% on board. So it's really interesting how this is caught on to people who you would not think are very interested in pollinators. So this is an example of one of those. This is Slow Pour Brewery. This is a brewery in Gwinnett County. So what we have found is that breweries and distilleries, and I'm sure it's the same in North Carolina, you come up at the end of the day, you want to get a beer or a cocktail, and you can sit outside and socialize with your friends. Well, these breweries and distilleries have decided to make that outside area beautiful by adding gardens. So these gardens are just happen to be pollinator gardens. So on census days, they have big parties. They will invite people to come and count. They will have specialty drinks just for those days. And this is an example of using Master Gardener help. They reached out to the Gwinnett Master Gardeners, and these are two of our great volunteers. And they showed up, put up a table with some information on pollinators, and they had their counting sheets there, and they actually assisted people in counting. We have the monks from the Monastery of the Holy Spirit in Conyers have embraced this project. They count every year. The Daughters of the American Revolution use it as their conservation project, and they actually get a little competitive to see which chapters count the most. VFW halls, they also count. Of course, we have Boy Scout groups, Girl Scout groups that count. So there's a lot of groups that count that, just like I said, are outside the box for pollinators. We have every major university in the state of Georgia sponsors a count. Every public garden, major public garden also sponsors a count. So it is truly a statewide event in Georgia, getting that way in South Carolina. And I know that you all will make it special, your own put your North Carolinian spin on things. These are some examples of pictures from last year. We have this adorable Cub Scout, and his troop worked on building the pollinator garden for Reed Creek Park, and he acted as the host for counting. So he handed out counting sheets for those who visited the park last year and participated in the census. On the upper right-hand corner, that is myself and some extension agents. The lady in white is our First Lady, Marty Kemp. She is a big pollinator advocate and has added a lot of pollinator gardens and habitat to our wonderful capital. The bottom right is a state park. I believe that was Vogel State Park. Most of our state parks actually will have events, and this is a group who worked on that pollinator garden and actually were hosting events on that day. And then we have the school aspect. So this was designed as a no-cost science, technology, engineering, and math STEM program for schools. In Georgia, we have something called Title I schools, and that may be a national moniker for these schools, but they don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of parent volunteer help. But for participating in this project, you only have to have a pollinator garden, and they can use it with the school's help and a little creativity to do many STEM activities, including creating a water catchment system, engineering the beds for the pollinators, pollinator gardens for the pollinators to visit. They can use the data for math, and that's really that's the most popular thing teachers do. So the students come and they count, and the teachers have their data and upload it to the system. They have their schools count, and then they will have, in a few months' time, the county counts. They will have the state counts, and they can use those numbers to do things like graphing exercises. We're going to compare our school to the school down the street, or our county to a sister county in a different part of the state. They can do graphing exercises. They can do two-way frequency tables. Some schools use it for creative thinking. So if we are looking at the results and it's a cloudy day, why are there less butterflies than maybe a year later when it's a sunny day? So some creative thinking, some statistics work. All of these are on the website as either lesson plans or worksheets. And I'm about to add a whole lot of information on monarch migration there as well. So if you're a teacher or you work as an after-school club leader at a school, if you go to the educators tab, there's a lot of resources for you to be able to creatively use this for the census. Now, one question I get is, if an entire school participates, what do we do about the first graders? They are not going to be able to generate data that's really useful. And the way we do this is they're not uploaded. So the school does a count. Let's say the school is doing a counting day. You get to that school, they have used our insect mascots to make signs saying, "Welcome to Census Day. Today's the day you make a difference." The principal is on the PA system saying, "Welcome to counting day at Oconee Middle School." They're using our Spotify playlist. They have practiced. It is go day. So the older students who've actually practiced and their teacher feels confident in their data is collected and uploaded. The first grade teacher who's just happy their students are outside looking at insects and not being scared of them, she will collect their sheets and they just will not be uploaded. So that's one way that we validate the data for the schools. So as you can see, they decorate the hallway. The teachers dress up as bees. It truly in Georgia is Pollinator Day. All right, so social media. I mentioned that we're very active on social media. As the coordinator of the project, I am a one-woman show. I don't have an assistant. I don't have an intern most of the time. It is pretty much just me. So social media is a really great way to get things out. On Facebook, we are the Southeast Pollinator Census. And on Fridays, we have a Fun Fact Friday. And that's something that you don't have to know to do the census, but it is an interesting, maybe entomological fact. So teachers, master gardeners, individuals can pull these and put them on smart boards. Emory University uses them for their teachers. Many schools use them on their smart boards that day, or the teachers will save them up in the summer. Master gardeners will use them for their social media. So anything that you see on that page, you are free to copy and put anywhere you want to. You don't even have to ask permission. Our Instagram is Southeast Pollinators. I will be honest with you. I'm not as good on Instagram because I haven't mastered how to do it from my computer where I can schedule ahead, but I do have a new program, so hopefully I will get better at that. We also have some brochures and memes and insect mascots on the website that you're welcome to use for anything. You saw the beautiful flyer that Amanda made for this presentation. A lot of that came from these the marketing tools that are on the website, the resources page. This How to Count, you can download that and print it, and on the back you can also put information about an event that you're having, maybe the date and time and what you're doing. These little memes that like time flies when you're saving pollinators, you can download those and use them anywhere. And again, the insect mascots can be used for a lot of things. I use them on hats, stickers, all that type of thing. So what's the impact of this project? Why does it matter? We've determined that, but how do we evaluate impact? Well, I mentioned that when you upload your accounts, you give us a fun fact that you learned, you give us some comments on the project, and these are just 3 out of the hundreds that I got last year. So the fear you feel about pollinators decrease as your knowledge increases. You can't yell and run around if you want to see some insects. I'm assuming that was a school child and not maybe a 30-year-old master gardener, but who knows? And the census serves as an ideal platform for ecological, entomological discussion and education. So you can see it matters. People learn from it, they create habitat, and it creates behavioral and attitude change. The number one comment I get every year that makes me the happiest, and I get it multiple times, is from gardeners who have been out in their garden for years. Maybe they get out in the morning, they're weeding before it gets too hot. They are scouting for insects in the middle of the afternoon before it's time to start dinner. But by sitting out in their garden for 15 minutes with no other gardening chore, they come back to me and they say, I had no idea. I had no idea of the number and the diversity of insects that visit my garden. Last year, I had an 80-year-old woman who, because of the census, built her first pollinator garden. I kept up with her through the process, and after the census, she said, I wish I'd have done this 20 plus years ago. So it is a way to empower people to make a behavioral change in their garden to really make a difference. And one story I want to share with this group is I was involved in a project in downtown Atlanta near English Avenue, which is the concrete jungle, right? There was a church that was very old there, a big church, St. Mark's, that had burned down. But the frame of the church, the bones, was made of brick and it was still there. We were contacted by the people who live there, and they wanted to make it a community center. And they asked if we could make it into a pollinator garden. So we went down, I met with the State Botanical Gardens in Athens, headed the project. I was just a small part of it. And we planted a pollinator garden. And every once in a while, when I'm down that way, I will stop and see what it's doing, how it's working. And I was down there a couple of years ago and saw a American bumblebee, Bombus pennsylvaticus. This is listed as a rare bumblebee. Now, I was in the middle of Atlanta, the concrete jungle, and I was blown away. I was so excited. I'm taking pictures. I'm verifying what I think it is. So if that can happen in Atlanta, think about what it can happen in your own garden. We know that if bumblebees have everything they need, they will not leave the area. They can travel maybe 500 square feet. If they have nesting materials, a great pollinator habitat, some water, they'll stay. And you can actually have, as Doug Talmy calls it, your own backyard natural park. And it's true, and it's empowering, and it's exciting to be a part of that. All right, I know this video will not play because we tried earlier, but I have a good friend that works at Georgia Tech. I'm a big Georgia Bulldog fan. We do not agree at football season, but we've had fun with this project. So we made a video. This is Jennifer Levy on top of the Georgia Tech Cloud building. She has beehives at the top of the building. We met and we did a video about how we can't get along on the football fields, but by gosh, we can get along with pollinator conservation. So not only is it a serious project where we're educating and teaching people, it is a project to have fun with. So I know you all will have fun with it as well. I mentioned the insect mascots. So we have made stickers, we have made hats, I've made t-shirts. We will have a merch site that will have all these things that are readily purchased that we don't make money on. It is solely because in response to agents saying, hey, I'm leading a group. I would like to have a shirt that identifies that I'm part of the census, or hey, I want stickers to hand out and I don't want to mess with printing them, or even signs saying this garden is part of the census. So these are things that are available to you guys, or you guys can print them out using Vistaprint or whatever you'd like. Just know that that's coming. And with that, I think my enthusiasm has made my voice a little shaky. I'm going to stop sharing, and I know y'all have a lot of questions. So Amanda, Alyssa, I am ready for questions.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate you sharing all that. Wow, that was a lot. You guys have done such amazing things in Georgia, and oh my goodness, that Cub Scout was adorable.
I know, they're so cute. Those kids are so cute. When they dress up as bumblebees and stuff, you can't beat it.
We're working on that in our office. So actually we haven't had too many questions. So the first question that somebody asked was, is the Southeast more at risk than other parts of the US for pollinator decline?
I don't think so. It may be that they heard we were doing the Southeast Bumblebee Atlas project. And I think there are other Bumblebee Atlas projects up north in the Northwest, but we have been working for many years to bring it to the Southeast. So that's really why it's there. One thing I failed to mention is you don't have to sign up on the website or anywhere to participate. You can decide that morning you want to participate. The sign up on the website is just for the newsletter.
Yeah. And Sean, I just saw that. It says, are you finished with signups for the event in August? So Sean, Carol, like Becky said, people can decide to participate the morning of. The reason we're doing this webinar so soon is that North Carolina is just joining the census for the first time this year, and we're trying to raise awareness, both for the statewide, but then also kind of give y'all a chance to reach out to folks in your communities to galvanize folks. And so you have this information when you start hopefully spearheading your own projects to get this going in your own communities. Now, Carol had a question, can you count more than one 25-minute period?
Okay. So the periods are 15 minutes. And yes, you can. You can count on the same plant in different times. You can count, some people will count on one plant in their yard and then count on another plant the next day. I even have people who tell me that they want to compare different plants in their yard, their own little mini science project, or someone will count at an event on Friday and count with their family on Saturday. So yes, you can count more than one time.
Excellent. So Linda had a question for, do we count non-insect pollinators too?
Very good question. They're very important, but this is an insect study. So you can enjoy your hummingbirds and your Even up here, we have bears that pollinate the goldenrod. So you can enjoy those. And then you can just say, I'm counting insects.
Excellent. Oh man, the questions are rolling in. This is great. So Elena asked, what plants do you recommend for pollinator gardens in North Carolina? Elena, we're going to have I'm going to send out some resources after I email everybody the recording of this. And because there are a couple of different plant lists that NC State Extension has developed, that the Xerces Society has just released for the Southeastern United States. And Becky, I think you guys also have a recommended plant list on the website as well, right?
You do. And Amanda, anything that you come up with like that you want everybody to know, just send them to me and I will put it on the website as well. I know you guys are the experts up in North Carolina.
So Sean had another question. Is there a specific time of day that is recommended for the count?
No, I actually have some people that count at night. They're looking for moss. I know it gets hot, and I know here at least I count in the morning because in the afternoon I'm burning up and it seems like the insects get a little hot too. So just whenever, and whenever it's convenient for you.
Excellent. Oh, this is a really great question. So Randy has a question. What qualifies as a pollinator garden and how do I get mine counted?
Okay, so I'm sure Amanda can talk to you more about getting your garden certified. For the census, any plant that you see insect activity, if you live in an apartment and you have a balcony and you have lantana on your balcony, you can use that to count. So we're just interested for the census in the individual plants. That being said, what we find is some anecdotal evidence. If I take all of the information on the plants people counted in, and I look at how many plants recorded the most butterfly counts, then I can say these are proven plants that butterflies use. So we do have some of that information, and that's on the website.
That's really cool. That is, and I will say that's one of the reasons why I love promoting citizen science projects like this, because ecologists, entomologists, gardeners, we all have our own anecdotes about what we see in our own gardens, and we share that information with our friends and our communities. But it's really great, especially as extension agents, to be able to have that kind of quantitative data to say, actually, yeah, if you want to attract swallowtail butterflies to your garden, plant these. Here's 5 plants that we know swallowtails really actually come to. So I'm really excited to see that data start coming in for North Carolina. Let's see. So Jess asked, hold on. Jess, and let me answer the second half of your question, Randy. So getting your pollinator garden counted. So Becky, you are counting new pollinator gardens that are started as a result of.
If they built a pollinator garden because of what they've learned in any of the census things, we have them upload that. But I know you listed a whole lot of really cool certification programs.
Yeah, so there are a ton of different garden certification programs that are both state centered as well as national. In North Carolina, the National Wildlife, the North Carolina Wildlife Federation and has the Monarch Highway program, and that is a North Carolina centered program. But then there's also the Xerces Society has a pollinator habitat registration program. The Pollinator Partnership has one. There's a couple of Monarch centered ones. Then Doug Tallamy's Homegrown National Park is one. And for extension professionals out there, the USDA People's Garden program is for not just extension programming, but it is actually administered through the USDA's Extension Foundation, and it's to raise awareness about publicly available gardens. It doesn't have to be a pollinator garden; it can also be a community garden. But they offer a lot of continuing education for garden administrators through the People's Garden program. So it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. how much you want to pay, because some of them are paid. There are usually signs that come with them and newsletters. So, really you can do some shopping around. I know that for in North Carolina, I'm working on kind of summarizing all of those different garden certification programs. So Randy, when I get those together, I will send it out to the email list that we've developed from this, and you'll get a list of those, and you can make an informed decision. Let's see. Jess asked, would you count a whole flowering bush or just watch a specific section for the
That
count?
is a great question. And I apologize for not addressing that. What I tell people to do is you need to find enough of that plant that you're comfortable counting with. So a lot of times if you have a big plant, I encourage people to put their arms out like this. And whatever is in this is what you count on. Because I know my mountain mint patch, man, it'd be impossible. So I have to just take a smaller section.
That's very practical. So Carol asked the link for the 2 days reporting. So the all of the main website that Becky gave, and I'll send that back out. That is where you're going to do all your reporting. So right now, if you go to the main website, it's got like one look, right, Becky?
Yes, the day of the census, that morning, the look will change and you will be able to upload your counts and download your certificate. If you are, one thing I failed to mention is if you are leading a group and you want the certificates early, they'll come up a little early, but I don't open the portal to put the results in until that morning because it causes confusion if I put it up early, and that's from experience.
There you go. Yeah, because you're trying to really focus on the 18th, which is a Friday, and the 19th, which is a Saturday, and just trying to really get it in that kind of window, just for ease of reporting. But this is one citizen science project in like a host of there's so many different citizen science projects out there. The three that I kind of have been using in my own extension programming, this one, because it's a really easy, positive 1 day or 2 day event. It's very easy to digest for the general public. But there is the Southeast Bumblebee Atlas, and I know that the administrator for that, Lori, is here in the recording today. And so that is one that you can report individual, and it's focusing on bumblebees. And there is kind of different levels that you can participate in that. You can do a very intense study, or you can actually just report just bumblebees that you see, and they have a portal, and Lori's awesome. She just posted the link to that in the chat. And the other one that I promote is iNaturalist. That is an ongoing 24-hour-a-day worldwide, anything that's alive, including fungi, insects, animals, plants, anything that's moving around and living. You can take pictures of that and report it to iNaturalist. And I know that some of these, a lot of citizen science projects kind of sometimes connect on the back end, but the data set that's in iNaturalist is insane right now. They've been doing it for, oh my goodness, almost 10 years now. And so the data that they have is really incredible. And by promoting this citizen science projects, we're trying to help we're trying to help scientists kind of understand all these things happening. But we're all humans, and so by each one of us doing what we can do, it can kind of make this really big impact. So sorry, I went on a bit of a tirade. I get a little excited about my citizen science projects. Elena asked another question. So she asked, should we count caterpillars as well, or only mature insects?
That is a good question. What we found is you usually don't see a lot of caterpillars in August, but yes, if you see one, put it, yes, count it. If you know what it is, most likely it's a butterfly or a moth. Well, it would be a butterfly or a moth. Well, no,
That's
maybe
right. Well, it's sawflies.
yeah, fly log. If you know what it is, stick it in the category of what you know it is. If you see a caterpillar and you're not sure what it belongs to, just stick it in the other insect category.
Awesome. This is a great question. So Tracy asked, what is the minimum space between observers? And she's asking specifically like how spread out should kids be in a classroom setting?
Very good. Just try and make it so the kids are not counting on the same plant, overlapping plant areas at the same time. A lot of schools will have the buddy system where somebody is counting and saying out loud, butterfly, bumblebee, and the other is making the ticks. So that works out really well. And people could count on the same area, but not at the same time, and just try not to have too much overlap. The big thing though we're getting is what insects are visiting what flowers. So the amount of flowers is not as important as the type, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's see, Lori is on there. Okay, Sean, so you said that you have a butterfly garden in your county. Yeah, so when you're putting in your data, it's only new gardens. So but kind of like from today back, if you already have a pollinator garden established, you haven't started the garden because you learned about the pollinator census. It's only when you learn about the census and you start a garden, right? That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that gives us a measure of how effective our program is. And y'all know how Amanda works so hard for extension, and it's important that there's feedback to let her know how well program is doing. So it's same type of thing.
So let's see here. Lori, I'm going to put you on the spot here and you can answer this in the chat. Are you one of the, so iNaturalist is also really cool because they're asking, they usually have specific experts on the back end doing verifications. So if you put up a picture of a bumblebee and you're just like, this is a bumblebee, but you don't know which species it is, a lot of times they have entomologists in the back end going, oh, it's, an American bumblebee or a Pennsylvania bumblebee, just to verify. Lori, are you helping with those verifications? I think she is, and there's quite a few other ones in North Carolina. She says she lurks. She lurks around iNaturalist. I know that I have a few friends who are entomologists who also lurk around iNaturalist and kind of verify those things. And if you're not familiar with iNaturalist, you don't have to have an account to go look at the data. It's really interesting. But and they have an app now for both Apple and Android, which they haven't always had. And the Android app works, thankfully. Let's see. Oh, here's interesting. So Jeannie asked, do you recommend adding a bee box to your pollinator gardens? And Meredith, you're kicking around. This also might be a good question for you.
Yeah. Why don't we see what Meredith has to say? I have opinions, but Meredith's probably the expert now.
Well, I think bee boxes are going to help for certain insect species, and you're going to have different insects visiting different flowers, but having a bee box will allow mason bees, other types of leafcutter bees, nesting habitat. So it's a good pairing to have in your pollinator garden. So that's not necessarily going to, I think, impact the census so much. You're going to be watching plants more so, but to have like an all-around nice garden set up for your bees year-round, bee boxes are a good thing to consider putting in.
Becky, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I love bee boxes. I've been teaching about bee boxes for 20 years probably. So yes, they're great to have, just don't leave them up too long so we don't create a problem with pathogens, and they're a great educational tool. If you want to see a leafcutter bee at work, or you want to see a mason bee or a grass carrying wasp, they're amazing. But if we get too much into habitat, I will say they're going to need those stems that are hollow, but for this, yes, they're beautiful. I have several in my garden, as a matter of fact.
Very cool. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. And this is a good one for you too. So Rachel asked, how do you prevent yourself from counting an insect more than one time?
All right. So here's the deal. You do the best you can. So every time an insect lands on that plant, you're making a tick. It may be the same insect. It may not be, but statistically, and I know this is hard to it was hard for me to wrap my head around. Statistically, you don't know if it was the same insect or not. So you may see that a bumblebee actually land on your plant, go away and come back. And you're like, that's the same bumblebee. I saw it the whole time. Statistically, you do not know that. So every time an insect lands on the plant, make a tick. And I know that means you're counting the same bee more than once, but that is how the project is written. And that's what the researchers know we're doing. And statistically, that's what they want us to do.
Very interesting. Oh, and I'm so glad you have a statistician on the back end, because I am not a statistician. I am a gardener. And Carol, hopefully that answered your questions. I think I'll ask this one though. How do you avoid double counting as the insects are moving about? So that kind of answers that question. Okay. What about this one though? How do you make sure participants don't count the same insect more than once? Is that still kind of covered in that?
Yeah, you probably will maybe count the same one more than once. So just remember, number one, you're going to do the best you can. And number two, you're going to count every time an insect lands on the area that you're counting. So if you have a bumblebee that's flitting around, you're counting every time that bumblebee lands on that plant. And I know that's a little counterintuitive, and I know that makes you think, well, how good is the data? But statisticians will tell us, just like if people do the bird count, you know, you may know that a bird is coming to your feeder that that was there just a few minutes ago, but statistically, they want you to count every time somebody comes to your feeder. Well, we want to count every time somebody lands on the plant.
Jess asked, would you recommend video recording or taking pictures of your watch plants in case you miss something or misidentify?
Whatever makes you, whatever you want to do to be accurate and enjoy the day.
Okay. Julie, Julie, we didn't mean to confuse you. The census does not have to only be in new gardens. The census is in any place that there is a plant with insects on it. The questions about the new gardens was only referring to the questions that are asked when we record the data, right, Becky?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. So wherever you are counting, it could be an old garden or a new garden. It's just whenever you go to the website, the website will ask you when you enter your data, did you start a new garden? But it can be an old established garden. It's anywhere there's a plant with insects on it that you can do the census. Let's see. And Regina, it's just, so in terms of spacing, it's really just to make sure that the children or people are not counting on the same plant or are not counting kind of in the same area. So Becky, I was thinking, so let's say there is a big patch of mountain mint and it's really active. You could have multiple people kind of counting on that mountain mint, just maybe in different sections. Uh-oh.
All right, I got to tickle my throat. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Ooh, this is a great one. So Rachel, Rachel, I appreciate you trying to clarify this, because it is kind of, since it is a new project, it is a little kind of trying to clarify. So she's like, if I am looking at a hyssop plant and there are 10 stems, if I see a bumblebee go from one of those stems to another, or went from one to one to one to one, would you count that each time it went?
Because technically we're counting insect visits, right? So every time an insect lands on the plant you're looking at, you're counting it. And again, sometimes it seems counterintuitive, but it is statistically the way we have to set the project up for the data to be used successfully.
Excellent. Which goes back into that, this is being used for science. So, Becky, you were being very intentional about how you designed this project so that when scientists or when anybody wanted to write about the data, there was a basic understanding of how to interpret that data, correct?
That is correct. I worked with statisticians and researchers across the US, not just in Georgia, actually, to make sure that the counting criteria and how we were doing it was useful. And they know that we are dealing with community scientists. So they know that, you have to know that going in.
Yeah. And for folks who are new to citizen science or want to learn more about citizen science, there are research papers about kind of best practices for citizen science and which projects have been most effective at engaging different communities. The Extension Foundation has done some research on this. And if there's more interest, especially from Extension professionals or community members, I have a list of citizen science resources that I just need to put into a pretty page and put up on our webpage in Lee County. And once I do that, I'll send it to you. All these projects, they just take so much time. So there's no more questions in the chat. Before we go, are there any other questions from the audience that has stuck with us? Give people a chance. This is not the last chance. Our contact information, I'll make that available. You flashed it up, Becky. I'll flash mine up again, and I'll put it up on the YouTube posting of this, as well as in the follow-up emails. Any kind of emails you've been getting have been coming from me. So feel free to email me, no problem. Somebody did make a comment earlier. I did give our director in Lee County a bit of a hard time. Dr. Bill Stone is our county extension director, and he is totally aware of the importance of pollinators, I promise. Poor Bill, he's been subjected to all of the pollinator insanity here in Lee County. So he is more than aware of the importance of pollinators, but he does help us think through projects and to remind us that to kind of get out of our own echo chambers, and folks who are gardeners and who are very passionate about the things that they learn and want to teach people. It's always a humbling experience to remember that you have to meet people where they're at, and remember that sometimes people have a high level of knowledge and some people are still just learning the basics, and starting with the basics is the best way to engage people.
And we want to remember ourselves. So yeah, I think it was great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to everybody's awesome projects in August, and you'll be hearing from more of us from us more later, and definitely we'll be sending out more reminders as we get closer to August. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Becky. We appreciate your time.